Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 70 of the Strong, Savvy Cyclist and Triathlete podcast. I'm Menachem Bro, your host, and this week we have part 2 with Tim Farin following up on the 2020 season, World Pro season, and talking about what was and what may be here coming in 2021. Now, for those of you over on the HV Training YouTube channel, you can see me waving at you here. We're trying this as a video for the first time for our podcast. I haven't really felt the push to put the podcast on YouTube because who listens to podcasts on YouTube, but a couple of you have asked if we'll do that, so we're giving that a shot here today. Now, we have a fantastic interview with Tim. We talk about what was in 2020. Both of us were really surprised, and I think that's one of the things that we really enjoyed, actually, on both sides of the microphone about 2020, is that we really didn't have any expectations, and it was really exciting bike racing again, almost like the old days. So we cover a couple different really interesting topics, including will the teams force their riders to actually live in bubbles, kind of like the NBA did, so that people are able to stay healthy and to be able to train, or are they going to allow their riders to kind of stay where they are in the world, and then we'll tackle that next year. We also talk about race radios. Is that something that is going to possibly boost the racing by getting rid of it, or is that something that's going to stick around also for next year? Because as we know, the Giro d'Italia was exciting. Dan Martin, Israel Startup Nation, finished second rather. And the first Israeli ever to start and finish a world tour, Guy Niv. I met up with him the other day. I actually have his jersey, which will be put up on the wall behind me here, which is really cool, the one that he actually wore with his numbers. And there's just so much, that's gone on a personal level here for me, for you, the listeners, whether you're new or you have been following the Strong, Savvy Cyclist and Triathlete podcast since February of 2019 when we started it. A lot has changed here in 2020. Now, over on my private Facebook page, I actually posted about an interaction I had yesterday when I went to the pharmacy to pick up some diapers for the kiddo. And essentially, every time you go to the checkout, or I've gone to the checkout, they ask you, do you have a membership card? That's the first question they ask you, and then they start checking you out. So this time, the question was different. And even though I heard the question and it registered, I didn't have the right answer. She said, do you want to pay regularly? So I just automatically said yes. And then while she's checking the things out, I'm like, what does she mean regularly? Like, I don't want to do payments. It's not that expensive. I don't need to finance it. And then I go to turn to take the bag. And as I always do, I look over the receipt and I'm like, hey, wait a minute. This is double what I was supposed to pay. And I said, I have the membership card. And she said, well, you said you wanted to pay normally. I said, usually the question is, do you have a membership card? She's like, well, that's usual, but that's not what I asked you. So let me ask you this. And that led to a whole 5 minutes of standing in line. But let me ask you this. What happens if you don't wait until July 1st to start taking your riding or health seriously? What if you do it here on December 28th, 27th, whatever the date is today, the day after Thanksgiving, Black Friday? That in and of itself this year is a complete change. What if you don't wait? What if you start today? What if you start right now your training plan for next year? What if you start working with a coach for 3 months during base to help get you on track and shore up the areas that either you don't like training or are weaknesses and you don't quite see them? That's why I say weaknesses. This is misses that we have. Kind of funny, kind of dorky. But what if you do change something today that you know you should? What if you do sign up for that bike fit? What if you do go ahead and start a strength training program that's geared for performance instead of just general strength? What if you do shut your phone off 2 hours before bed and go to bed an extra half hour earlier? What's going to change? What would that long-term effect be? So that's my question to you before we dive into the episode today. Now, Tim and I had a great conversation. We talked about is the UCI and are the teams, one of those two, going to stipulate that the riders live in bubbles, certain areas, and train in those areas, small and together in these capsules, kind of like what the NBA did. Is that feasible, and will they actually go that route? That's number one. Number two, we talked about race radio, and this is a question I really wanted to hear Tim's take on. Are they going to take the race radio out of pro cycling because of how exciting this year was? And that's something that he and I actually agree on, but I asked the question, and it's a great one that he answered. Then the other question is, What's going to happen in 2021? We already see the Tour Down Under has been canceled because there weren't enough teams willing to go. What's going to happen to the rest of the year? Is it going to be like the Giro d'Italia? As I mentioned, Israel Startup Nation's Dan Martin finished second. It was a very exciting race. I actually kept losing track every 2 or 3 days of what the leaderboard looked like because it was shifting so much. So these are the topics we cover today, as well as his book, Cape to Cape. Fantastic book. I don't read German. The pictures in there tell stories. I've actually been kind of cheating a little bit and using my Google Translate to speed things up. But it's a fantastic book. And if you're somebody who's a publisher or knows somebody who's a publisher and would like to translate it to English, Jonas Deichmann, who you're going to hear on the Strong Savvy Cyclist and Triathlete podcast here in a couple of weeks, is a fantastic person, and he's actually the story behind everything is just really interesting. And as you'll hear from Tim, I'll let him tell you. So without much further ado, if you find this podcast, when you find this podcast to be really interesting, and the other episodes to have information about strength training and training in general to become a stronger and savvier cyclist and triathlete, please share it with 5 people. Help us grow the podcast episode. Now, without much further ado, let's jump over to our interview that we just had last week with Tim Farin, wrapping up the 2020 World Pro season and looking ahead. What does 2021 possibly have in store? Tim, welcome back for part 2.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me again. Yeah. Well, sunny day.
Yeah, you said it's the best day of the year, and you're stuck off the bike for right now.
Well, I'm happy to be on this one.
Well, last time you had just finished, I think, 180 or 100 kilometers. I have to.
Yeah, it could be. It's seems like long ago. You know how it is.
Yeah, sometimes 3 years ago.
You wonder.
Well, let's jump in. It's now November 17th or 18th, I believe. Today's the 18th. So yeah. The season has finally ended for road cycling, and we had a ton of surprises through the end of the Tour de France, as well as the Giro and the Vuelta. Can you share a little bit about, we had said, or you had said that Jumbo looked to take the Tour de France, and out of nowhere, here he comes, Pogacar. Surprise.
Yeah. Well, that is something that really got to me. I was on a podcast with some German colleagues back in like a week before the Tour de France started, and I was going to have let's say a daring position there and say that Pogacar was gonna win, but I couldn't pronounce it. I wasn't sure about the pronunciation correctly, and it was audio only, so. I wasn't, I didn't really want to pronounce it incorrectly. So that's the one thing where I said, okay, it would have been nice to name him there as the favorite to win the Tour, which obviously I wouldn't have, seriously thought that would happen. I thought when we last spoke that definitely Jumbo Visma was going to have it, closed and sealed. No, and I spoke to some people like Lennart Kemna after the Tour de France. I had an interview with him recently, and he was just surprised, to see the jump of Pogacar, like on the wheel basically, to win the Tour on that day. I mean, that was something that no one would have expected. Yeah.
And then to seal it on a time trial without a power meter. And that comes to what I think we've done kind of a full circle where we've gone through the heart rate monitors and then the power meters, and we've become so focused on the numbers. And here we are, somebody who just realizes it doesn't matter what the numbers are. Either I ride hard enough or not. Do you think that's going to drastically change or have an impact on younger riders that are up and coming as to how much they focus on power?
I think in race, yes, and it's what you can see is that they are. Now I spoke to Mark Hirschi, for instance, yesterday. I spoke to Lennart Kemna. You can see that they are very good at preparing, and they are very good at knowing what's going on in their bodies, and they have all the metrics. But in the race, I guess that there's much more tactics. There's much more you can say trust in what's going on in your well-prepared body. And that if you know the routes coming up, he will be able to, you have a platform to build on, and that it's going to hold, and you don't have to drastic or schematically follow the metrics that you see on your screen. Like I remember when Tom Dumoulin was more or less criticized for his style of riding a couple of years ago, when they said, okay, he's simply following, his threshold levels and going. It isn't going harder. It's boring to look at. I doubt that that this is going to be the kind of style that we'll see in the coming years. I think the knowledge of what's going on in your preparation, if you have all this in order, you'll be able to be more spontaneous. That's the way it is. You can you have a better foundation to build on.
So the days of hashtag Chris Froome staring at stems may be going away.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I think that's what we saw. I mean, even though you can see that racing is controlled by a lot of outside information also, but this year was definitely the year when this collided with a lot of spontaneous ideas coming and people that felt in good form and that saw how a race unfolded and that could spontaneously shape it. And there were more than just one or two or three names. It was constantly happening. So yeah, I think that's the one, let's say the biggest punchline was that day in the Tour de France. But there were other days as well.
And that's what I was just going to say. There were quite a number in the Giro. It was almost like every other day, another, like I lost track after the seventh or eighth stage. I'm like, who's in the lead? I have no idea, because somebody else attacked and gained another minute and a half. How do you think that we had talks, I think 2 years ago, about taking race radio away? I think this kind of helps that argument of saying during the actual open road races, take it away, whereas the time trials, let them have that.
Well, I think this is a difficult one because it's been the discussion about this has been on for so long, coming back on and off. I think it's the safety argument and it's also a legitimate claim for DS to say, I want to take part in what's going on in the race, so I want to be able to communicate with my team. He's also or she's also a part of the team. So I don't think you should remove that. I think it's possible to override it, and I don't. From what you hear, it's not that they're remote controlled or something. I don't think so. So I don't know if it's really necessary to do that. I think that the style of racing can change. Maybe it's also a question of handling technology better, you know what I mean? So when people get used to it and understand the potentials of it, they will also become more liberated. That sounds very philosophical now, doesn't it?
Whoops, that's one of the things that I think is a lot of people are missing is exactly what you said here. I'm just looking for a quote from one of the team director sportifs that I can't find, where he essentially said the same thing as you, which is, yeah, it would add to the race, but then you're missing the leader of the team. People think of the rider, the main rider, as being the leader of the team. And we'll talk about Chris Froome and Dan Martin here and how that will play out. But a lot of people don't realize how much of a hand in the racing the director sportif has, because we don't hear that. We don't see that. We see them in a 10-second interview, but it really doesn't allow you to understand how much they are coaching the team, as opposed to, the main rider is the main rider and everybody's riding for him. There's so much more that goes on there.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the one thing, if people don't know much about cycling, and it takes a long time to understand it, how much it is a team sport and how much, a good team working together is something that finally materializes in a triumph, in a one-day stage or in a stage race or in a classics race. All the people working together, this is not possible without someone in the car or more than one person sitting in the car and sitting or standing wherever and collecting information and having a communication flow. So I don't think it's a good idea to. I think it's too simplistic to just say, let's get rid of this. I don't think so. The others need to adapt and be better at communicating and getting their teams to work together. So essentially, we spoke about this last time, and I think I don't think it's, even though Pogacar's win was more or less perceived as a solo win, I think that we can say that the notion of team sports in cycling has been proven this year.
Yeah, and unfortunately, at a lot of the amateur levels, and Trevor Connor was a guest previously, and he had a similar experience that I think a lot of those of us who understand and execute the team side of racing, where he was in a race and he was actively trying to bring a break back because even though he didn't have anybody there or something like that, and then in the parking lot after, one of these guys from the other team who had a guy on the brake said, "What are you doing? You're not trying to win the race. You're just bringing it back." And he was like, "Well, that's bike racing. I want my guy to win and he's not there." So, and people have this disconnect when we're, in the amateurs, because you just think we'll get somebody in the brake and then we'll just block the whole time.
Yeah.
How can we start to understand better the role of the team? I know there's a book called Full Gas. I can't remember who wrote it. It's on my reading list here. It's on the bookshelf. Do you have any, as you've gone through as a rider, do you see a way for us as average riders to understand better how much the team comes into play for racing and for the Grand Tours?
Well, I think this is for the media, for the people that that work in the coverage of cycling to show, and like, for instance, I spoke to Mark Hirschi yesterday. So he's a guy, who's seen as the big solo rider this year. He's going to, he's trying to win. He's trying to win stages at the Tour de France, and he's going for the classics wins. This is a one-person show. It's not. So when you speak to him, you understand that there's a whole level of, he speaks about all the people that helped him, that didn't just help him, but he feels like a part of the team. And it wasn't clear on certain days whether or not he was going to be the one who's, the star leader. So you can see that there's a team shaping up and a team taking on different positions or different roles as a race unfolds. And this is something to cover. I think this is, unfortunately, in most of media coverage of sports, you will only focus on, like the guy who's scoring the goals, or the person who's winning the stage or whatever. But this is something I think to bring to focus on more and to show what's going on behind the scenes. And it's kind of complex because you have so many things coming together. It's really chaotic, and it's easier to focus just on the fallen GC rider and the people that are taking control, and then you've got the stage winner. So it's kind of binary. But I think it needs to be a thing of the media to show the complexity of cycling a little more.
And that even applies to really big adventures that one person undertakes. There's always a team behind. One that we mentioned in the first part of the podcast here, and now I have in my hands, was the awesome book Cape to Cape that you took part in. And thank you very much for this. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah.
And as I said before we jumped on, even though my German is spotty at best, and Kristen could probably read that, one of my athletes, the pictures in here are absolutely fantastic. So if you guys are listening at home, you can kind of see on the YouTube, on the video clip we've posted, there's just, this is incredible. And this is so far above and beyond the expectations that I had. I was like, oh, I'll definitely be able to connect with it. And, even in an individual endeavor, and Jonas right now is off on 120 times Ironman, whom we'll hear from on the podcast later. Even then, there's a whole team and random strangers he's meeting. He's now swimming across one of the capes, but it was too windy, so we went back and these people housed him. And there's always a team, but as cyclists, we tend to think, oh, I just need to put my bike, my clothing on and go out. But there's the mechanic, there's your family, there's your kids, there's the other people you ride with. There's always so many people that help. By the way, if anybody out there is interested in helping get an amazing story, and again, my German isn't that great, but Tim, if I'm not mistaken, you are looking for somebody to translate this to English, correct?
Definitely. I think that Jonas has much more of an international following than he does in Germany. I mean, he's got a lot of fans in Germany and Switzerland and Austria, but the book is German only, and I think it's a shame because, as you said, you can see. I mean, the story you can see it as something that appeals to cycling fans, but also the whole the scene of people who are interested in individualistic adventures, people that go to and beyond borders, or let's say go to extraordinary adventures and challenge themselves. So it also appeals to people who maybe don't participate in sports per se, but that want to look for their next level of, let's say, management skills or something. So it's a very strong message in this book, and it's also it's a beautiful book, the pictures and all this. So I'm also in love with the text that I produced, because I think it wasn't easy to recapitulate this, and it's the feedback that I get from people that are not fans of cycling or of this kind of thing is the thing that encourages me the most, because I think it's something that should be out there in English as well. And then we need a publisher, of course, who's able to connect us with English speaking audience somewhere out there, which could be global. So I think it's a story that needs to be told to anyone who can read English. And Jonas, as we can see, if you look at his social media channels now, he communicates. Of course, he communicates in English. So yeah. He's an international personality.
Yeah, and as the folks will hear, thanks to your introduction, he didn't speak and doesn't speak the language through a lot of the countries he's going through. So it's gestures and body language, and that just adds a whole layer of complexity and also unity to the whole story. Just how he went. He explained how in the Far East, they won't tell you no. Even if they know the answer is no, you have to figure out how to ask, is this the train to go to X? Yes. And then you get on the train and you're like, I went the opposite direction. Why would you tell me that?
Yeah.
Well, speaking of togetherness, Chris Froome and Dan Martin are now here on Israel Startup Nation. That's a team that I worked with on the back end, the PR side, a number of years ago, when they first started up. How do you see this going? Because Dan just took the Vuelta, rode exceptionally well. I mean, the team that's I think the best the team has ridden. Even if he wouldn't have won, I think he finished second, if I'm not mistaken. He podiumed rather. That was the best the team had ridden, and they've really come a long way in a short time.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on having two leaders like this on a team? Is it the point where Chris it's a matter of the DS will just say whoever's riding better by X point will ride for him? Or is this something where you think Chris is kind of more in a I guess, mentorship role, although I don't think that's right? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, this could be, but I have my doubts. I think he will be out there to prove again that he has a chance of going for the GC in the Tour de France. I don't think that two of these guys or two types like these for one equipe are too many. I don't think so. In a team, especially with the ambitions that they have, it shouldn't be a problem really. I mean, and both of them should be used to the kind of situation. Now, this is kind of difficult to say. I mean, he had a shitty last year, and so is he going to come back? I think age is also a problem here, and we often see people that announce they are going to be coming back in. I'm doubtful whether or not he's going to make it really. My feeling is that he's not going to be there on top level.
Yeah, I think that the extent of the injuries that he sustained, more so than the age, I think that he has a very special psyche that really allows him, but the extent of the injuries, and people don't realize how few missed training days there need to be in order to get to that top level where you're competing in the top 15 for a Grand Tour. Like that's, let's say 8 to 9 years with minimally missed days. Like even if they break a collarbone, they're still training. But to have what he went through, where he was essentially off the bike for 2.5, 3 months, I think a little bit longer, like not even on a stationary trainer turning the pedals. Like that's how, and the detraining on top of the trauma the body's going through, it pulls. I really think that Chris will look to kind of reform his career, or to end his career on a reformed, focusing more on either specific stage types to win, as opposed to the Grand Tours. But I think he still has 4, 5, 6 years of high quality racing. It's just that Grand Tour, it might take him another year of building. I looked at it and I'm like, his performance matches what I would expect from somebody having gone through that extent of trauma, not just a broken pelvis. Who was it that broke the pelvis in 2015, I think, and came back in 17? There was a nasty crash, 2014 maybe.
I don't know right now.
I have to think, but they came back. I think they were riding for Quick Step, if I'm not mistaken. I'm probably wrong. Well, what's most exciting for you for 2021? Like, what are you most looking forward to here?
Is the season going to take place as usual, like a non-COVID season? Is it going to be happening or not? I'm very doubtful, with the classics that are actually should be prepared now, because it's 3 months down the line right now. Het Nieuwsblad starts in late February. Is it going to be there or not? So the whole, I think this is one of the most interesting stories right now. How are they going to prepare for the season? Because the season was, in terms of preparation, you could see that the level of the athletes was tremendously high, but the level of preparation for the selection of the teams and all that was very spontaneous and must be suboptimal. It must have been suboptimal this year. So I think it's kind of hard to do that, for a longer time to go. And then what's happening with the dates? There's a calendar. That's the first thing. And the second thing, I think, will we see we talked about this last time, and I think we saw that Jumbo Visma has taken over from Ineos Grenadiers. But then at the end of this season, we saw like the backlash or the fight back of certain of the let's say more established teams, and you could see in the Giro what they were pulling off with Rowan Dennis there. So this is going to be there's going to be a big battle over the big three-week stage races. Definitely, I think that's going to be a big thing to watch next year, because there will be more likely more than 2 or 3 teams going for that role.
We already saw the Tour Down Under was canceled. They didn't have enough teams. I think a lot of that is the travel stress, the distance. Whereas, what do you think? My thoughts I'll share after, but what do you think about the teams creating these capsules essentially in Europe for the 3 big stage races? Do you think we'll see a changing in how they're preparing, and that they'll stay in one region, pretty much camp there and create a capsule? Or do you think that they're going to try and go about what they did this past year, since, well, it kind of worked?
Yeah. Well, I think the capsule it seems to be kind of very far away from the reality of the riders and of the whole people that work with the riders and the whole circus. So the kind of in extremos, the NBA, what they did was the ultimate form of putting people in a vacuum for how many weeks. I think this is something that really doesn't work in cycling. I think you have too many people and too many places involved, and you have too many, let's say, regional events that want to be that want to have their race in their region at the time they want to have it. So you could see last year that you had the conflicts between the Giro. At the same time, you had the Giro and the classics going on, like the nicest time to watch TV as a cycling fan. But then again, in terms of marketing and all this, very complicated. But I don't think that it's easy to get all the organizations together and say, we'll have a capsule here for 3 months, we do all the races. I doubt that their egos will allow them to do that, because there's not, even though we have a governing body in cycling, it's not the same thing as an NBA that can tell the organizations and the franchises to this is going to be the format. The UCI can't do that. They have there's a different set of events going on, and so I don't think it's going to be that way. No.
Yeah. And you touched on, there's so many people in different places. The NBA, exactly. You can do that. The players are used to traveling and being in hotels, but psychologically, I mean, think about cyclists and how we like our routines. We like things a certain way, and we're already disturbing that. So to put people into regions, I think is tough. It's going to be very interesting. That's for sure. I mean, it's hopefully exciting in a good way.
And in terms of you could see this year, maybe it's one more very interesting fact is that we can see the power of youth, and not just the power of youth, but the cleverness of youth as well. You can see the guys, the very young guys doing very, very good things, clever things where you wouldn't expect them to do that. You could expect them to be athletically on a top level because they've all been, undergoing the kind of program that you maybe can offer them, very high scientific advice. But riding a good bike race is something else. It's experience, it's teamwork, like we said. And you could see this year that that very young guys were doing this on all sorts of races, all sorts of race days, in all sorts of settings. It's going to be interesting to see. Maybe it's a Corona special effect, maybe not. Maybe you could see that people coming out of U23, coming into these levels are already in a much more professional shape and much more, let's say, have a lot better education and could also already be forming factors for the races for years to come.
Yeah, I think that's the most exciting part for me, is to see the younger riders come in and express the new way of training and really moving forward. And exactly what you said, starting to see the new generation come through who's been open-minded about strength training and what that actually entails. Training less, not going out. I'm working with a triathlete at a fairly high level. He's young, I think 18, 19.
Mm-hmm.
And his previous coach had him running very high mileage. And that's, as far as I'm concerned, there's certainly athletes that need that and respond well. But there's a growing number who don't. Like, it's such a small percentage that do well with that high mileage for running or cycling. And I think it's really, we're going to see a big change where, you're going to have the power meter, but it's in the back pocket, and learning to ride by feel again. And it'll be interesting, man. It sounds like we have some really cool stuff coming up here in 2021. Are you going to be looking forward to any one particular race here?
Wow, as always, the Giro, I would say. I like it the most just to watch it. I think this year was no exception, and I could feel the madness, or let's say, I could feel the angriness of the Italians who said that the French were taking away their penultimate stage, and it really happened. The Tour de France took place 3 weeks without any changes to the schedule, and then the Giro was on, and everyone's looking for that stage going over Colle dell'Agnello, which would have been another one of those drama days. Now the penultimate stage was nice, the one they did, but I don't think it was a comparison to what would have been. And so I think that the Giro always manages to surprise, and even if people drop out, or big protagonists may break whatever on the first day, even if you think this is a deficit in terms of the lineup, it's always the most fun stage race to watch for me. Now, saying that, I didn't really have enough time to watch the Vuelta, which is something I heard was I just saw just the tiniest bit of it, and then you see all the people that followed every minute. They say, "Wow, what a race!" So yes, it's hard to say, but if I can pick, it's gonna be the Giro.
Nice. Well, Tim, thank you for spending not one, but 2 interviews with us here. Can you tell the folks where they can find the Cape to Cape book, as well as your writings and musings, and connect with you?
For now, I guess look for me. It's Tim Farin. You see my name, so you can Google me. You can find the book on Amazon, which is, of course, the most established way to get it shipped internationally. And I can also send it out directly. I have signed copies here, so it may take a couple more days, but I can actually do the fulfillment. I do it myself, which is maybe not my core business, but I still do it.
Love it, man. That's pride in work. That is pride in your work.
Yeah, it's nice to do it. I mean, it's nice to ship out. We did, Philip and I, Philip is the photographer who went on that trip. we did a couple of years ago by ourselves without a publisher. We had a book that combined his nicest landscape cycling photography with a couple of texts by myself. And it was nice that we did the whole international campaign, including the sales. We sent stuff to Australia and Israel and South Africa, I don't know where. And it was fun to do that, to send out your own book to the people that really appreciate it and put in a personal message, even though, the whole handling is not what it's not, get paid for it, whatever, but it's fun to do it anyways.
That's awesome, man. I strongly encourage everybody pick up a copy. It is absolutely fantastic. Again, just a little bit that I Google translated. It is a very interesting story. And if anybody's interested or knows somebody who would be interested in translating that over to English, please get in touch with Tim. And Tim, I'm looking forward to having you maybe the middle or end of next year, and we can have a little bit fun and then reflect on the changes that 2020 put on 2021.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be happy to.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.